Welcome back, deep divers. Today, we're heading to South India, the Vijayanagara Empire, but not for the usual stuff.
Not battles this time.
Nope, no epic battles or dazzling palaces, at least not directly.
Going deeper then.
Exactly. We're diving into their government nitty-gritty of how this empire, a powerhouse for centuries, actually worked.
The machinery of empire, always fascinating.
Right, so like what made it tick? And luckily, we've got sources that tell us.
Not just about the kings and their decrees.
Yeah, but how everyday folks fit in, the whole system.
And that's where things get really interesting with Vijayanagara.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Because I know you love those little details that bring history to life.
Absolutely. What's so intriguing is they manage this balance, strong central authority, but also a lot of local freedom.
Not just a king with an iron fist, huh?
Not at all. It's more, well, in some ways you could almost compare it to a modern federal system.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So at the top, obviously you've got the Vijayanagara kings, powerful guys, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. But they weren't micromanaging everything, every village, every...
Blacksmith, yeah, I get it.
More like the king sets the big picture, the vision, and then delegates a lot of the day-to-day running of things.
Okay, so who's on this central admin team then? Besides the king?
Well, you'd have the king's council, of course, as ministers for different departments, advisors, basically the inner circle keeping everything running smoothly.
Right, the folks whispering in the king's ear. But history's not just about meetings in a palace, right?
Yeah.
What's a detail that brings this central power to life?
A detail. Oh, remember all those Roman gold coins that ended up in South India through trade?
Vaguely, yeah.
Well, the Vijayanagara kings, they were smart cookies. They didn't recognize Roman authority.
But they weren't going to say no to gold.
Exactly. So what did they do? They defaced these coins, literally cut right through the image of the Roman emperor.
Whoa. Talk about a power move. We'll take your gold, but on our terms.
Precisely. It shows they were in control, shaping the economy to their advantage.
Love it. Okay, so we've got the king, his advisors. But what about out in the provinces? Those Nayakas I've heard about, the regional governors, were they just puppets or did they have real power?
Ah, the Nayakas. Crucial to understanding Vijayanagara, these weren't just figureheads. They had serious clout. We're talking their own armies, collecting taxes.
Wow, really?
Oh, yeah. They even launched big projects, building temples, public works.
So, like mini kingdoms within the empire.
You could say that. They were expected to be loyal to the king, of course, but they also had a surprising amount of freedom to manage things locally.
Okay, now that's where things get really interesting, right? That tension between central authority and local control. Sounds like a recipe for trouble brewing.
You're spot on. That tension is definitely there, and it did eventually play a role in Vijayanagara's downfall. But for a long time, it was actually key to their success.
Okay, now I'm hooked. Explain how this potential powder keg actually helped them thrive.
Well, think about it. This balance made the empire super flexible. The Nayakas could adapt their governance to their specific regions.
So instead of a rigid top-down approach, they had this dynamic system that could adjust to all sorts of challenges across a huge, diverse territory.
Exactly. It was a high-risk, high-reward strategy, but for centuries, it worked brilliantly.
So these Nayakas, these regional governors with so much power, it makes me wonder, how did the kings keep them in check? Was there ever, like, pushback?
Oh, absolutely. That tension between the central authority and the local autonomy, it was always simmering there, you know?
I can imagine. Like some Nayaka, maybe after a big victory or if their region's economy is booming.
Starts feeling a little too independent, a little too big for their britches.
Exactly. And then they start questioning those decrees from the king, maybe even flexing their military muscle a bit.
It definitely happened. Sometimes things escalated to actual conflict and the king would have to use military force.
Makes sense. But Vijayanagara lasted for centuries, so they must have had some pretty clever strategies to keep those Nayakas in line most of the time.
Oh, they did. It was a delicate balancing act, for sure.
All right, spill the secrets. What did they do?
Well, a lot of it came down to a mix of incentives and checks. The kings would reward those Nayakas who stayed loyal, you know.
Give them a reason to play nice.
Exactly. They'd grant them prestigious titles, land, even arrange marriage alliances with the royal family. It was all about keeping them invested in the system, giving them a stake in the empire's success.
Classic carrot and stick, huh? Give them a reason to cooperate, but also make it clear there would be consequences if they stepped out of line.
Exactly. And remember those land grants to Brahmins we talked about earlier? That wasn't just about religious piety. It was a shrewd political move.
Oh, I see. creating a counterweight to the power of the Nayakas.
Precisely. You create a class of influential Brahmins who owe their position to the king, and suddenly you have a check on the ambitions of those regional governors.
A strategic triangle. The
Mhm.
king, the Nayakas, and the Brahmins, each with their own power base, all jockeying for influence.
Fascinating dynamic, isn't it? And for the Vijayanagara kings, navigating that web of relationships, those power plays, that was key to their success.
This all sounds very male-dominated, though. Were women involved in the political scene at all, or was it strictly a boys' club back then?
It's a question historians are still exploring. We know that formal positions of power, those were mostly held by men, but women, especially those in the royal family, they could wield considerable influence behind the scenes.
The power behind the throne, huh?
You could say that. Royal women were involved in court affairs, they participated in religious ceremonies, some even managed their own estates.
So they weren't just sitting around embroidering all day.
Not at all. There's even evidence that some were involved in diplomacy, political negotiations, really shaping events, even if it wasn't always out in the open.
That's pretty cool. It's a good reminder that power can take many forms, even in societies that seem to exclude women from those official roles.
Absolutely. And as we uncover more historical records, we might find that women played an even more significant role than we currently understand.
Okay, I'm starting to see how Vijayanagara's success wasn't just about military might. They built this complex system, surprisingly adaptable, that allowed them to rule this vast and diverse empire for centuries.
It was a remarkable achievement. And their system of governance, that blend of centralized authority with local autonomy, that was a key ingredient in their longevity.
But it also makes me think about their eventual decline. All that tension between the king and the Nayakas, did that power struggle ultimately play a role in their downfall?
Well, those tensions were always there, right? But as the empire grew, some Nayakas became more and more powerful. They started to chafe under the king's authority.
It's like the empire became a victim of its own success. As it grew, those forces pulling at the edges became harder to control.
That's a good way to put it. But it wasn't just internal pressures that brought them down. There were external threats too, rival kingdoms, economic challenges, even divisions within the ruling dynasty itself.
A perfect storm of factors.
Exactly. But even though Vijayanagara ultimately fell, its legacy continues to inspire.
Speaking of legacy, besides this impressive system of government, what kind of impact do they have on India? What do they leave behind? Their system of government was definitely impressive, but what about their culture? Did they leave a lasting mark on India?
Oh, absolutely. Vijayanagara's impact on South India especially, it's huge and still felt today. We're talking art, architecture, literature, religion. They really shaped the cultural landscape.
Yeah, when I think Vijayanagara, those grand temples come to mind, the ones you see in photos, all those intricate carvings.
Exactly. Their temples and palaces are stunning. And they weren't just builders, they were major patrons of the arts, too. Like, the Vijayanagara period saw this flourishing of Telugu and Kannada literature.
So poets and scholars, all that.
Oh, yeah. They produced works that are still celebrated today. Vijayanagara wasn't just about power, it was a center of creativity.
Trendsetters, even.
You could say that. And something else that's important, they were vital in preserving Hindu traditions and culture, especially at a time when a lot of North India was under Muslim rule.
Right, right.
So they were seen as defenders of the faith, and that legacy, that image of Vijayanagara as a bastion of Hindu culture, it's still powerful in South India.
Makes me think about all those stories of lost cities, hidden treasures. Does Vijayanagara have any of that? I feel like I've seen those incredible ruins.
Oh, for sure. The ruins of Vijayanagara are a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and they're still revealing secrets to archaeologists and historians. So much to uncover.
Bucket list destination right there. But even with all we've talked about, it feels like we've just scratched the surface.
It's a huge topic. We've covered a lot there. Power structure, their policies, cultural influence, even the role of women. But there's always more to the story. Layers hidden beneath what we see.
Ooh, okay, I like where this is going. So not just the kings and Nayakas, but those behind-the-scenes players.
Exactly. Every society has those informal networks of power, right? The whispers in the corridors, the influence wielded behind the scenes.
Those hidden figures pulling strings.
That's what's really fascinating. And in Vijayanagara, who were those people? Were there merchants with enough clout to sway economic decisions? Religious leaders holding sway over the masses? Maybe even women exerting their influence through connections and smarts.
It's like in those historical dramas. The queen's advisors, the ladies-in-waiting, those seemingly minor characters who actually have a lot of power.
Precisely. Those informal networks, they can shape everything, how decisions are made, policies implemented, even how the empire was perceived by its people and the outside world.
It's like an iceberg, right? We see the tip, the official stuff, but there's this whole massive part hidden underneath.
Perfect analogy. It reminds us that history is rarely simple. There are always different perspectives, hidden motives, and those subtle power dynamics that are hard to trace but can have a huge impact.
So to really understand Vijayanagara, we need to go beyond the official records, beyond the kings and Nayakas, and dig into those hidden stories, the whispers in the corridors of power.
That's where the real intrigue lies. Who knows what we might find? Maybe merchants were more influential than we realize, or perhaps there were powerful religious figures subtly shaping the empire's destiny. Or maybe, just maybe, women were pulling the strings all along.
Now that's a thought. The possibilities are endless.
That's the beauty of history, isn't it? There's always another layer to peel back, another mystery to solve.
That endless sense of discovery, I love it. But for now, we've reached the end of our Vijayanagara deep dive. What a journey.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you. And remember, this is just the beginning. Keep asking those questions, keep digging deeper. Who knows, maybe you'll be the one to uncover the next big secret of Vijayanagara.
A challenge for all our deep divers out there. Until next time, keep those curiosity gears turning.